Simply put, thinking doesn't make us happy. Thinking doesn't promote healing.
I got a glitch. Oh, it just hit me
Hello
now.
everyone and welcome back. It's Ash, your truth-bombing fairy godmother for everything love, dating, and relationships. It's been a little while since my last upload, so I wanted to go ahead and jump on and say hello and check in with you all and let you all know how I'm going, and also share one of the main practices I've really been relying on these past few weeks to help me through my healing process. And hopefully by doing so, it can help any of you out there going through your own heartbreak or big life transition or just a difficult time in general as well. So in my last video, I shared that I finally got my travel exemption approved from the Australian government to come back to the US to be with my family. And for those of you who follow me on Instagram would have seen that I have since done. And I'm here. I'm actually back in my childhood room right now. I've been staying with and visiting different family members and friends, and it's felt so incredible to be back. But of course, being back here doesn't mean that I'm magically healed at all. It's just sort of giving me a more safe and comfortable environment to really dive into some of that more intentional healing work. And notice that I did say intentional work because in a lot of ways I do think that's what healing is. I think emotional wounds are a lot less like physical wounds, and that time alone often doesn't do a lot of that deeper healing. It definitely does in some ways, in that the impact of certain experiences or feelings can be softened over time. But when your heart has been genuinely rocked by something, in my experience, time alone is often not enough. I have remained stuck in the pain of certain heartbreak and relational traumas for years. And in addition to me being someone that loves and feels very deeply and therefore feels pain and heartbreak and loss very deeply as well, I think a lot of that stuckness comes from not truly doing the work that healing often requires, from not pulling the reality and the truth of my pain and where it lives inside of my body out by the root and truly being present with it, and instead living very much in my head and essentially trying to think my way out of heartbreak by trying to rationalize it or make a certain situation or story make sense, or thinking that if I could just understand or interpret something a certain way, or if I could just find that missing piece of information, that I could arrive at some type of answer that would make my pain disappear. And that's not how healing actually works. It doesn't happen here. It doesn't happen in our heads or in the parts of us that are interpreting our outer world. Healing happens here. It happens in the body. It happens in the heart. Trauma and pain live inside of the body. So purely engaging the mind in an attempt to heal is not going to be very successful. And learning to redirect our awareness and our presence from our head to our body and our heart is a practice and therefore a type of work. And one of the best videos I found on this exact practice is a talk called From Head to Heart by Tara Brach, who I've mentioned a lot here on this channel. And I have linked this in the description box down below, and I highly, highly recommend giving it a watch because my goodness, does it resonate with people like myself who are really analytical and most likely anxious and who get very much lost in their own heads, ruminating and trying to figure things out, especially things that have caused us a lot of pain. And in that video, she discusses how thinking often perpetuates feelings of anger and sadness and a sense of separation or disconnect and depression and anxiety and so on and so on. Very rarely does being stuck in our heads for prolonged periods of time result in feelings of happiness and joy and openness and warmth or love. Our thoughts keep us separated from genuine connection, that loving awareness, as Tara refers to it as, and therefore our potential as humans. Simply put, thinking doesn't make us happy. Thinking doesn't promote healing. Sure, there are certain cognitive realizations that we can come to that can certainly help us along our healing path, but the majority of that really genuine, heartfelt healing and therefore peace doesn't come from thinking. And to be clear, that doesn't mean that the goal is to eradicate thinking, which would be impossible to do, even if that was the goal. As Tara puts it, thinking is obviously essential to our survival. Thinking is a great servant, but a terrible master. It serves us in ways that are completely necessary, but when it's in control and you're believing every single thought or interpretation or story that pops into your head, you're going to make yourself miserable. And Tara explains this next concept of looping really well, which is that when the on button of thinking gets jammed, we leave the rawness of our emotions that are within our body and instead escape to our heads. And by doing so, we get stuck in a loop. We have a fear-based or anxiety-based thought, which then creates a mood in our body, and then we assign a meaning to or interpret that mood, which then creates more fear-based thoughts, and the loop continues. There is a difference from thinking and therefore interpreting our world from truly experiencing and inhabiting true reality. And that difference is learning how to move from our head to our body or our hearts, and especially learning how to do so when it really matters during times of difficulty and pain in our lives, when thinking as opposed to feeling and really tapping into our hearts truly isn't doing us any good. So as I touched on before, when it comes to that pattern of looping, this practice interrupts that pattern by moving out of our head and back into our heart and our body, by bringing an intentional yet non-judgmental loving awareness to the mood that is underpinning our thoughts. And practicing this in our day-to-day lives can look really simple. And for me, simple has been best, such as a 10 to 20 minute daily meditation where I lift up the hood of my thoughts and instead shift my attention into the mood and the physical sensations that are actually happening within my body, and really just sitting with that and holding it in my awareness and letting myself know that these really difficult, painful emotions belong, that they are allowed and welcome here. And with meditation or any type of reflective practice, the key element is understanding that our thoughts are not reality. We do not have to believe every single thought that we have. As Tara puts it, thoughts are real, but not true. There is a difference, and it's up to us to decide whether or not we want to get hooked by our thoughts and therefore caught in that looping pattern that just creates more suffering. But of course, not getting hooked becomes really fucking hard when it comes to those repeating visitors, as Tara refers to them as, those really sticky ones that just keep perpetuating about a certain situation or experience or person. And these sticky, repeating visitors have been the constant undercurrent of my life for the past several months. And breaking out of that loop has to involve really intentional practice. So when I get under these really painful thoughts and stories I've been holding on to, I start by asking myself, what is it I am believing right now? And it's usually things like, I'll never fully be chosen. I will always be or feel alone. I will never have someone in my corner or someone fighting for me, or I will never experience true love or connection like that again. And I'm sure a lot of these very real but not true beliefs sound really familiar to a lot of you as well. And from there, I go deeper by investigating the actual feelings that are underneath those beliefs. And for me, it's most often feelings of loneliness or abandonment. And sometimes it's just straight up fear, a raw, terrifying, childlike fear of being alone. To be really vulnerable and speak to a really honest, raw, unfiltered truth of where I am at right now emotionally, I do not like the experience of not having a partner right now. It's really fucking lonely. I don't like not having my person to share every little detail about my day with. I don't like going to bed alone at night or waking up by myself either. It's really lonely. It feels really uncomfortable, and it just makes me really fucking sad. And you know what? That's okay. It doesn't mean that I like feeling that way. Of course I don't. It's really painful, but it's where I'm at right now, and it belongs. My feelings belong. I belong. And I don't need to be feeling anything else other than what's currently here. And I have literally zero desire to fill the void of my heartbreak and my loneliness with anything or anyone else, because I refuse to abandon myself again. But man, admitting how sad and lonely and scared I feel about being newly single is something that past versions of myself would have been so embarrassed and judgmental towards. But allowing the reality of my emotions to not only exist, but to show them kindness and acceptance is key to my current healing process. To be kind to my loneliness and my fear over and over and over again. And if we spend enough time showing kindness and acceptance towards these really painful feelings, we can stop that looping pattern, because through our loving awareness and presence and caretaking of our raw emotions, we can eventually soften them. And when the feelings soften, the thoughts and false beliefs stop generating, or at least when they do generate, we're not as easily hooked, they're not as sticky, and therefore we're able to embody a much bigger picture of ourselves and our genuine reality. We don't have to live in this very limited, often very painful perception of ourselves and our world that our mind often creates for us. But it does take a genuine willingness to not want to live from that place anymore, and of course, consistent practice. And I'll leave you with this quote from the Holistic Psychologist Instagram page, which sums this up perfectly, which says, "Healing is actually learning how to be rather than how to do. How to be within our bodies, how to leave the ego thinking mind to actually experience the present moment." And then she goes on to say in the caption, "Healing is not analyzing, thinking, or constantly working or doing. Healing is learning to return to the body. It's learning how to feel, learning how to respond in ways outside of our conditioning. It's integration, becoming our true selves." Okay, my loves, I hope that this video was a little bit more uplifting than some of the past ones that I've been uploading recently, and that it shows a little bit more light at the end of what's been a very dark tunnel for me, and perhaps a really dark tunnel for you too. Again, I highly, highly recommend watching Tara Brach's full video on this topic. She's absolutely incredible, and I think you will get a lot out of it. As always, thank you so much for watching. I love you all so much, and I can't thank you all enough for just your ongoing support and empathy and patience and compassion. You guys are all the best. I miss you so much when I'm not here, so I will hopefully aim to be back very soon.
Tell me what was in that stuff you gave me. I think I like it. In fact, it made me high pitched.